Hi, and welcome back to the video series showing how to do multi-year cash flow calculations. I'm going to show something here that I'm hesitant to show. If you build your sheet cleanly, step by step, you shouldn't actually need this. If you do a lot of subtotaling, then there are better ways to do this. But sometimes you get to the point where you've got a surplus, for example, and you're not sure what to do with that surplus. So what I have right now, this is a sort of an expansion on the last sheet that we worked on. I have a situation now where we've got, and I had to really be artificial to do this, so be careful here, but I've got my RRSP contributions going into the RRSP, and that's based on the surplus. So we can see that those two amounts stay the same as they should. So we've got a surplus, credit cards are all paid off, mortgage is still just being paid on a regular basis, no worries, but at the point where the mortgage gets paid off, we make a little shift here, back just a little bit before that, where the surplus now isn't all going to the RRSP. So we can see back here at age 56, the full surplus is going into the RRSP, but here at age 57, we've got a little bit of surplus that's not used. And the reason that that's not used is because I've actually set my RRSP formula, and this is quite complicated, but I set my RRSP formula so that we would have the deduction limit based on how much this person has put into their RRSP, new room, so new deduction room, less what this person put into the RRSP. So we can see the deduction limit growing here, but it will come to be true that out here closer to retirement, which is when this is typically going to happen anyways, we're making contributions into the RRSP, and I did it trailing by a year, so that's why it's not quite perfect, and that's to avoid a circular reference. But we're making contributions into the RRSP that are less than the full amount of deduction limit available. So if you take this $15,999 plus this $2,400, it caps out at the $1,799 from the previous year. For this year, $18,359 gives the sum total of the contributions for that year plus the PAC for that year. So it's really kind of a way to avoid a circular reference, and for the purpose of multi-year cash flow, that's just fine. So what that means, though, is that we have an unused surplus. So now I want to go find where we're going to put that unused surplus, which is really the point of this video. Okay, and I think that probably you can get by without worrying too much about RRSP deduction limits. You may find it's a problem once your surplus really creeps up. If it does, building the max formula for that is very similar to building the RIF minimum that I had previously shown. So what we're concerned with for this video is the embedded if statement. So right now, I've got nothing going into the TFSA. I built this formula before where we're going to do sort of an allocation by percentage, which honestly is an easier way to do this. But if you wanted to do an embedded if statement, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to do a regular if statement. So I'm going to say here, all right, I'm going to put money into the TFSA. If we have a surplus, and if that surplus is actually greater than what's going into the RRSP. So I really only am concerned about this if my surplus is greater than my RRSP contributions. And if that's the case, then the amount that we're going to put into the TFSA is going to be based on the surplus amount minus the RRSP contribution that's happening. And if that's not the case, then we're going to have no more TFSA contribution. So now I can grab that formula and I can copy it all the way across. And we should see some years here where we are putting money into the TFSA. So we can see here, for example, we've got $33,939 available, and we simply take that minus the amount going into the RSP, and that goes into the TFSA. Now, we're not going to bump into our TFSA limits here because this person's got a long time before contributing to the TFSA. But let's say that we had bumped into some TFSA limits. So this is where we might build another row here for non-registered contributions. So maybe we say, all right, if we have a surplus and we can't use all of our TFSA limit. So this is where you might go into what's called an embedded if statement. And I really think you should try to avoid this, but I had the specific question come up. And the way that an embedded if statement works, it's actually going to use two if statements side by side. So we would say here, if, let's say for the sake of argument, if we have a surplus, so if that amount is greater than 0, and I'm going to make another if statement here, and if my TFSA limit, sorry, if my TFSA contributions are greater than, let's assume that we can only use the current year's contribution limit for the TFSA, so let's say just for the sake of argument that's $5,500, sorry, I missed my if statement there. If that amount is also greater than $5,500, so now, if that ends up being true, now we're going to do the value if true here, and I would say, all right, then I'm going to take whatever is over and above that 5,500. So now I would take my TFSA contribution, sorry, I apologize, I would take the surplus amount minus the TFSA contribution, okay, and I would apply that formula. So you see here you've got an if statement. This is where this gets tricky, is you really have to go to the top here. You really have to follow your logical test. So you go logical test here and then value of true, and it shows that if statement as being the whole logical, or the whole value if true for this guy. So my if statement here, value of true is that if statement, okay, and now inside of this if statement is where this gets a little messy. Now you can see logical test, sorry, like I said, it's a little messy. Logical test, value of true, and then I have to do a value of false. You also have to close out with a value of false. I'm just going to put in a 0 there, close my bracket, and hit enter. Now, I don't think we're going to see any values as we work our way across. Oh yeah, we should. We should in the years when we have a TFSA contribution. Now, I don't like that formula, but it does show the point. So we would take our surplus minus our TFSA contribution. What I should have done is put a 5,500 in. So B7 minus B10. And I'll just add a 5,500 in here so that we're always putting that first 5,500 into that TFSA. So really the thing with these embedded if statements is just that you can follow your chain of ifs. And you could do the whole financial plan like this. You could build everything so that your credit card and so forth all runs out on that basis. So you're paying off your credit cards in a certain sequence and you're contributing to your RSPs, TFSAs, and non-reg in a certain sequence. I'm not a fan. I think it's needlessly complicated. But, like I said, it can be done. Alright, that's good. So yeah, we have some false out here because I don't have, what did I not do to get my false out here? So if AQ7 is greater than 0, and then we do if true, oh, and I missed my second false there, you see that? So I didn't follow my if statement, so I have logical test, I have a value of true, but what I'm missing here is a second value of false. You can see that it's not highlighted. So I can actually do this kind of thing. I could put 0 in there, and yeah, that's fine. Let's pop back to the beginning and fix it. So I can put my 0 in there, and you can see that it's value of false here. And now I can copy that all the way across, and that should get rid of all my falses all the way across. And you can see the embedded if is not fun. It's a very complicated way to do things. You're very, very far better off just to build your subtotals one thing at a time and work off of those subtotals. and that way you don't have to worry about that level of complexity, so that you can just do your RSP contributions based on your surplus, do your TFSA contributions, and what's beyond that, for example. So I hope that's helpful. I really, again, discourage the embedded if. I do use it myself sometimes, but typically not on already very complicated sheets. It's easy to use when you have fewer pieces of data to work with. So I hope that's helpful, and I hope that you see the value of building rows like this surplus row, which is how we did it in class, versus trying to get fancy here with that embedded if. Thanks very much, and enjoy your continued studies.